Hello, good evening, and welcome to the Sunday Night Breakdown. Daniel Routledge and Dave Forrester with you to look back over an upset-packed weekend of British Basketball League Trophy action. Dave, we'll get to the exciting bit in a minute. Let's quickly run through Wednesday night's Euro Cup game where London Lions beat Hamburg Towers 83-66. No Ovi Soko. He was suspended for a violation of team rules. Apparently, he didn't play the rest of the games as well, so I assume that suspension lasted more than one game, but nothing was said after that. Lucas Meisner was ill for the Towers. This was a pretty comfortable game, really, for London. They had too much size, so Hamburg really struggled to score, and it wasn't until the second quarter that they started to get away, but they always looked likely to get away.
Yeah, Meisner was the guy who made the shots, wasn't he, in the first game?
Yeah,
He made a lot of he made
yeah, yeah, yeah,
threes. Yeah,
yeah,
he's a
yeah,
shooting,
yeah.
a pretty important piece for them. Yeah, it wasn't overly exciting. Commentary was all right. About that. Apart from that, I thought the nearest thing to kind of interest for me was it kind of gave us a real idea of London with everybody, apart from Stockholm.
Yeah,
Because they did have everybody apart from Soko.
yeah.
And basically, by the beginning of the second quarter, when Solowade came out, Solowade came in the game at the beginning of the second quarter. And he was their 10th guy on the floor, right? So if you think of then Soko was the 11th because he's not there, and then you have generally Soko would be the 10th, Solowade would ordinarily be the 11th. Then you've got Ward Hibbert 12, Kumagum, Willichiume and Kaboza somewhere between 13 and 15. And so it really kind of gave you an idea. He started only, I think, in this game as well. So obviously they're trying to get kind of involved, but he appears to be a bit of a sick note, you know? So that was interesting to me, that this is how he was planning on using everybody when everybody was there. And of course, they're playing 6 Americans in Europe as well. Six Americans, 6 foreign players in Europe, which they can't play in the BBL. And it does give them, you know, a significant amount of depth. It allows them to spare the minutes or spread the minutes around. You know, it gives them a real platform to challenge on all fronts. Sorry. You know, tough. They won the game. They won it comfortably. Yeah. They never were in any jeopardy of losing the game. No. Hamburg were never in a situation, but it wasn't a game that Hamburg needed to win. Because it would be nice of them to win. But, you know, I'm afraid the competition is, having been a newbie to the Euro Cup this year and having been pleasantly intrigued by it early on, the competition is beginning to drag for me. I know
well, you got a few weeks off now, Dave. A few weeks to rest and recoup before we come back with the last 4 rounds.
Yeah, I'm sure the people in you know, Fever Towers are immediately, you know, typing, you know, the notes to change the system because Forrester says so. Forrester's a bit
it'd be EuroLeague Towers rather than Fever Towers. Don't go into that political minefield.
Oh, yeah, thank you for keeping me right. Okay, neither of them sponsor this, so that's all right. So yeah, I mean, the reality is it's sport again. It's jeopardy. There's no real jeopardy. London are probably going to finish 6th. They might finish.
Probably going to finish 7th, I think.
7th, sorry, probably going to finish 7th. Have a shot at finishing 6th, basically, and therefore who they play is not going to be in their gift. Where they play is not going to be in their gift. You know, there's only 4 more games left, and outside of the Paris game, which I thought was great, albeit long, you know, I haven't really been, and that was McRae. I think McRae went off and Decker into 12, and that was a real game, and that was something really on that because of the geographical rivalry almost, because they'd built it up and they'd promoted it and all of that. Can it do that for 9 home games a year? You know, if you're playing teams from, you know, Macedonia or Montenegro or Poland, you can't. Not every game's going to be like London, London, Paris. So I'm not sure where they really go. You know, I'm not sure if you look back, if let's say, and they've got every chance of winning the knockout game because if they've got all their players, they're a deep team, therefore they can compete. You know, and they've got experience. And they can compete, and if they make, you know, and if the coach gets the rotations right, and they and everybody's locked in, and they're all healthy at the time, you know, if you're beating Hamburg comfortably by 20, Hamburg are great, but you're beating them comfortably. And you can win on the road. You've got a puncher's chance. But for hypotheticals, if they lose the first game, and out of 19, and they've ended up playing 19 Euro Cup games, and say they're 7-12 over those 19, or 8-11 over those 19 Euro Cup games, it would be a hell of a lot of effort for really. I'm not sure that much, and I appreciate there's credibility and there's coefficients and there's all that stuff, and I get that, I do, but I mean it's just not a competition which with a format which really enthuses me or encourages me. I much preferred Leicester the FIBA Europe Cup, where they played 6 games, and then if you get through, you play another 6 games.
Yeah.
But each of those 6 games,
and until 2 years ago, the format of the Euro Cup was similar to that. So basically, they used to have a group stage of 4 groups of 6, I think it was, and they would play each other 10 games. Then you'd go through to another little group stage of 4 teams, and you'd play each other, and then the top 2 of those would go through to I think they were best of 3 at that period of time. But they changed it a couple of years ago. I think it was partly because teams wanted to play games after Christmas.
Game.
Yeah. So,
a guaranteed games. You're going to recruit a team to try and compete in it, and then you're knocked out before Christmas, and you're paying a lot of money for a team that you didn't necessarily want. And I get that. It's where kind of the economics of the sport and the competitive framework of the sport clash, and those clashes are everywhere, obviously. But it's still a little bit like the BBL. Ultimately 36 games to eliminate 2 teams from the playoffs and then have a knockout playoff isn't in any way optimal. And I think it's the same with the Euro. It takes away a little bit of kind of edge to it for me. But they did what they had to do. They showed up. They knocked enough shots down. They played. The players, the team rotated. They got a full squad there, and they're a serious unit when they've got the amount of size and athleticism that they can put on the court. With Oni in particular, and Oni and Decker and Urban and Zubcic, there's and the 2 centers as well. That's a lot of size. Even for Europe, a lot of athleticism. So and they have started defending the 3-point line a little bit better. So maybe that's an improvement that's going to take them further. But it was what it was.
As you say, a comeback never looked likely, and even if they thought it was, 11 points early in the 4th quarter from Luke Nelson put the game away. So Kufos with 17 points and 11 rebounds, Decker 15 points, 8 rebounds, 4 assists, Nelson 14 points, only 14 points. Yoli Childs 14 points and 6 rebounds, Kendall McCollum 10, and James Woodard 10. They were 14 of 44 from 2-point range. Hamburg, which sort of talked to the struggles with the size that they had. Yeah. Deep breath. Here we go. Let's move to Friday night and start in Glasgow.
Caffeine. Just so people understand, I have had some caffeine.
Okay.
This
is what people tune in for, I think, Dave. Caledonia Gladiators 52, London Lions 50 in the BBL Trophy quarter final. It is quicker to say who did play than who didn't for London. So it was Josh Ward, Hibbert, Solowadi, Comagun, Kaboza, Walechi Umi. There was a few spot minutes for Herban Best, Nelson, and Sharma. Ali Fraser looked to be dressed, by the way. I didn't go into it.
Yeah, he's mentioned on the commentary that he was there, but Gareth wasn't ready to put him in that game. But I think he will be playing at some point.
Yes. So London's lineup is the first question. They obviously put out earlier in the day that 3 players, Decker, Taylor, and somebody else was injured. Who was the third person? Oni was injured. But that obviously meant we didn't know what happened to Soko, presumably still suspended, as he was suspended on Wednesday. And obviously Zubcic wasn't mentioned in any of it and wasn't playing. And Kufos wasn't mentioned in any of it and wasn't playing.
Yeah, that's about right. And there might have been somebody else as well, actually. Because Taylor was
on the injury list.
Yeah. We've been doing this for 2.5 years, and I don't think I've ever written. Maybe in the first couple of times, and maybe I wrote some stuff down, some notes down before we started. But we've kind of stopped doing that. And ever since Friday night, this game has been going around in my head, and it's been like thoughts just being joined up all over the place, to the point whereby I've been a bit irritable with everybody else, which has quite annoyed me. The starting point was in my head was, you ever seen The Matrix? You know, Keanu Reeves, he kind of gets, you know, dumped to an alternate reality, and all the different kind of lines, everything starts to join up and make sense eventually. And it seems that, you know, we've talked on and off the past 2.5 years, and people have been listening to, you know, God knows how many hours of content. You know, we've talked about basically everything kind of around the whole British basketball scene. It's very, at one point or another. And I don't think I've ever come across a game which has joined so many of those strands together in relation to, you know, but the politics, the governance, the sporting contribution, the sporting nature of the game, the structure of the season, the impact of money, the motivation towards competitiveness, and because we're all in kind of areas that we've not seen before. And it seemed, you know, and the more I thought about this game, the more it kind of enveloped so many different things, and I still haven't quite worked out what I'm going to say, but you know, in total, but it's not a straightforward situation that ended up in Friday, and my overriding thinking about it and trying to get off all the surprises and all this stuff, my overriding emotion is irritation with a little bit of annoyance at what went down. Now, firstly, because obviously we look at things from every side of it. Okay, the game. I just talk very briefly about the game. The game was frankly bizarro. It was pretty awful to watch. Caledonia were pretty poor. In fact, you know, if anybody wants to, I suggest you go and check out the Gladcast pod interview that they did with Johnny Bunyan and Gareth Murray afterwards, whereby they beat Johnny Bunyan. Basically said, well, it wasn't a B team, it was a C team. So we were rubbish. I didn't say we were rubbish, but he said basically we took the ball over and missed a ton of shots. We should have put the game away earlier. All the things which he said, which were absolutely right. Okay, Gareth Murray gave London credit for playing hard, which was also absolutely right. Okay, and the game ended up 52-50. It was 44-43 with 2 minutes to go. And it was, you know, offensively inadequate. Now, why was it offensively inadequate? Well, there's two teams. Both of them are solid, hard-nosed teams. Both of them are coached to play defense. So the defense is good. You know, you can't say it's not. In relation to Caledonia, there was stuff with Sloan basically being on the court. He shouldn't have been on the court because he had a rib injury. He played 12 minutes. He looked like he couldn't move. I'm amazed he played that many minutes. He didn't start, which was a giveaway. So they're missing Sloan, and Sloan's a major guy because he's a point of difference for them, particularly with his quickness and his scoring. You know, so that kind of mitigates a little bit for Caledonia. They also missed a ton of shots. You know, they missed a ton of makeable shots. Okay. So that's their offense talked about, and eventually Durham came through, made some plays for them, and that helped them through. London, what's London's situation? Well, London's situation is they played, you know, basically 64 minutes with Solowade and Kaboza played 64 minutes combined. They combined for 2 of 14 shooting. They had 11 turnovers between them. You know, now that just doesn't happen in professional basketball. If that's the way you're playing, you're not combining for 64 minutes.
No.
You know, you're not. The coach is taking one look at this and thinking, this ain't working. You know, what else have I got? And that didn't happen in this game. The coach didn't do that. What London did in this game was, to my mind, watching it back, entirely pre-planned.
Yeah.
They had 4 guys, 12, 13, 14, and 15 on their
I don't know
roster.
if you saw the interview before tonight's game with Ryan Schmidt, but he said
I heard the Gladcast one afterwards. I didn't hear that, no.
He said something along the lines of it was important to give those guys big minutes, the guys who haven't had big minutes so far this season, and also to give them a chance to win it at the end. I'm paraphrasing
I'm going to
slightly.
debunk that in a minute. Yeah, well, I'm sure that's exactly the line that they're pushing, and I just disagree with. I disagree with both the concept of that. I think that's wrong, but I don't think that's what happened. Right, and I'm not clearly they've got an organizational line to put across, right? And I get that. And the coach is the person who speaks out for the organization.
Yeah.
But for reasons that hopefully I'm going to get into and to justify, and then I might be wrong. People may say, no, there's not enough evidence to support that. That's fine. But I don't get that. And I don't agree with that. I don't think that's what happened. Okay. The biggest issue I have with the game as it was played was ultimately, well, actually, here's the thing. Let's start with the conclusion. The conclusion is the London Lions organisation did not want to win that game.
Yeah.
Right? The London Lions players did. No question. They played hard as hell.
Yeah, there's no question about that. Whoever goes out on the court, they're playing to win. Yeah.
And they played hard as hell.
Yeah.
But then you have the confidence. The organisation, in my view, didn't.
Yeah.
The players did. What does the coach do? Coach is paid by the organisation. Ryan Schmidt's a good basketball coach. No question. He's won in Canada. He's been on the NBA Energy League. He's handled himself this year. He's handled a very an ego-full group with more than 12 players, with players coming in and out. He's focused on the things you need to focus on to win. He's focused on defense. They still seem to all like each other, and they still seem to respect him. And that's easier said than done at this point of the season with the roster he's got, right? So he's a good basketball coach, right? And good basketball coaches are driven by one thing, which is winning. You know, and I appreciate it's slightly different. Maybe coming from the NBA background, whereby you win 50, you lose 27 games in a season. That's a brilliant season. You're 55 and 20. Okay, and so you're coming into the BBL, you lose 6 games in a season, you may not win anything, and it's a disaster, you know?
Yeah.
But nevertheless, he knows how to win. Right. Now, what happened in that game was that they had their numbers 12, 13, 14, and 15. That's Ward Hibbert, Komagum, Wilichume, and Kaboza, who were going to play the vast majority of the minutes. Then they had to start one of the other guys. They started Herban, played them 5 minutes each, half sat him down, he never came back.
Yeah.
To rotate the other guys, you then have Sharma, Best, and Nelson. Right? You've got a trophy quarter-final. So we're going to get to the governance thing and the competition thing about this in a minute. But just this is what happened in the game first. They rotated. They were rotated from my perspective by plan. Basically, this is how many minutes you're playing. You're playing 10 minutes each. That's it. They play almost to the point. They played 10 minutes each, 5 minutes, 6 minute mark in the second quarter, 6 minute mark in the fourth quarter. They're back in. Right. The problem that London had was that whilst they were playing hard, they could not score the ball. Whilst Caledonia were playing hard, Caledonia was scoring off their turnovers. And ultimately, the only time that they had played with any fluency at all was when Nelson and Best were in the game. Nelson was plus 15 in 9 minutes. Best was plus 16 in 10 minutes. Now, it doesn't matter how hard, right? How hard those other guys are playing, right? And let's be honest, it's not about giving young guys minutes here. Ward Hibbert is not a young guy. Ward Hibbert's a proven basketball. Soloade is not a young guy. There's 2 young players on that team, Wilichume and Kaboza. That's it, no more. You know, they've got a Division 2 team. They could have sent that down there and played some young guy if they really want to do it that way. So you have a game, 1 minute, what was it, 6 minutes to go in the game? You've probably got the numbers there. You've got a 1 point game or something like that.
I've got with 2:30 to go, 44-44.
Well, the interesting thing is basically they put on a run around the third quarter because Luke Nelson came in and basically, made some shots. Sharma got a steal at the halfway line and dunked it. And they had a rhythm going, and basically Caledonia were out of sync, and that game was just that was going to be tonight's game against Cheshire. London were going to run away with that game in the fourth quarter. Yeah, and he took all those guys out.
Yeah,
right. Now he's a good basketball. He's a very, very good basketball coach, right? And he knows that is not the best way to win that game.
Yeah.
So then you get to the question, okay, how much does long-term factor into it? How much does short-term factor into it? How much does that game matter? How much does the whole season matter? It doesn't really matter. Do you need to rest those guys longer because of the schedule that you've got coming up? then obviously the schedule gets worse. If they win, they have to play 2 more games in March.
Yeah. And the other thing was the Paris game, which is the round 18 game of the Euro Cup, just got moved from Wednesday to Tuesday, and that's the Tuesday after the trophy final, 2 days later.
It is, but we have to think that that's probably going to be a pretty much null and void game, don't we? There's not going to be much on that game because they're not playing anything before the Tuesday. They've got a European game on the Tuesday. There's no other BBL game scheduled that weekend, so it wouldn't surprise me if they fitted a league game in there. You know, so
well, no. But what I mean is, if they'd made it to the trophy final, they would have been in Glasgow on Sunday, having to get to Paris on Tuesday. I would imagine, but I would imagine the logistics manager would find it much easier to get a train from St. Pancras.
Well, that may be right. I think it's a little bit deeper than that, to be honest. I think there's a bit more going on than that. But just to get back to the game, so you take basically at that point, you've got these guys who played really hard, who are really close, and then you have an interesting thing which turns up when Onwas fouls out, right? So Onwas fouls out, and Gareth has basically been struggling for anything all game. And he decides he's going to go to finish the game with a Twin Towers lineup of Ali Hodzic and Tape, because they're not getting anything on the perimeter in reality. And at that point, if you're coaching to win the game, and you have Sharma on the bench, you don't have Ward Hibbert guarding Tape. Right? Ward Hibbert is guarding Tape the last 5 possessions of that game. And you watch it, and that's how they score. Not because Josh Ward Hibbert did anything wrong, because Josh Ward Hibbert is 6'4" and Patrick Tape is 6'10". Right? Or any, 5th grade basketball coach would have Sharma in that basketball game if they want to win it. Right? And this is where it says, I want to give those other guys a chance to win it. Josh Ward Hibbert has played his heart out in that game. He wants to win that game. If he has to sit down because there's a better matchup for somebody else to come in, he will take that like a pro. He doesn't mind. Those those lads, those guys might have got them to a certain point in the game, but there comes a point whereby if you're serious about winning, you make the necessary adjustments to win. And they didn't. And in fact, they left themselves, and that's why I say it was all predetermined. I just can't see, I didn't see the coach that game. And it gets even worse than that because we get to the point with 2.5 seconds to go, whereby they're on the baseline with an inbound. You've got these young guys, you want to see them go through it. Call a timeout and draw up a play. Let those guys execute on a play. I'll show you to that. That'd be development. Can they execute on what you asked them to do to get a shot in the last seconds to win the game? Didn't call a timeout in the whole 4th quarter. Really? You're trying to win? You got the ball on the bit. You're trying to win. It's a 1-point game. You don't make a sub in the last 6 minutes. You don't call a timeout in the whole 4th quarter. So that's why I'm debunking this stuff. That's why whatever Ryan said today about, that's an organizational comment about wanting to give them the chance to win. If you want to give them a chance to win, give them a real chance to win. Match up properly at the end. Coach the game and call your timeouts. Because that wasn't trying to win. That annoys me. That's irritated me all week. So it's not a question of just saying, well, look at the guys they played or how many minutes they played. It's the fact that those guys, unfortunately, weren't getting the job done. And you had guys on the bench who were getting the job done. In any basketball game, you look at the players that you've got and you decide who's going for it, who's playing well, and you play them. And he didn't. Now, there were some weird things about the game. Obviously, this interesting, there was Johnny Bunyan took a foul with 4 seconds to go, which everybody thought was a great foul, and I didn't because they were up 3 and Solowadi was going away from the basket. And I've never been one for fouling up 3. I don't like it. I don't know why, but I think this is probably an example why, because, in the BBA, you don't always get a defensive rebound off a foul shot.
Yeah.
And that foul gave them a chance to win, gave London a chance ultimately to win the game. But Tape made some plays down the end, and Durham made a play off the dribble when he got matched up with Comagum on a switch, which basically took Caledonia home. But my overriding thing about that was, don't go all the way to Glasgow. Don't ask all your players to put in a shift and then fail to coach to win the game in the 4th quarter. And that is not the way that a coach who is as competitive and as competent as Coach Smith acts. That's organisational. So when I say the Lions organisation didn't want to win, or didn't care about winning, I'm absolutely 100% certain of that. Now, sorry, Dan, I'm on one. I'll let you go.
No, you're okay.
Add to this?
Yeah. No. I mean, there's almost no point in going through the end of it. You sort of covered it anyway.
Yeah, okay. Now, where do all those other strands come in? Because it's a little in event. You've seen the Usual Suspects movie, you know. It's a bit,
Yeah.
Turbo Kid, you know.
Yeah.
And it all comes together, and then as Kevin Spacey hobbles off with his detective figures out everything that's gone on.
Yeah,
you know?
and he drops his stick and walks into the waiting car.
Away.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, exactly. The greatest skill the devil ever pulled was convincing people he doesn't exist.
Yeah.
And so I was thinking about that. Okay, well, let's get into why is this? So I'm working on the presupposition here that what I'm saying is right, because I believe it is. Okay. If anything I've just said isn't right, then basically, or people don't agree with it, then you can ignore the rest of the conclusions that are about to come.
Yeah.
Because the fact wouldn't be based. But this is what it was based on. Didn't go timeout, didn't make any subs, didn't match up properly, didn't, just didn't show an interest in winning the game. Why? Well, schedule. Is it a schedule thing? Well, it would be 2 more games. It would be a cup final in March and a semi-final, which would actually be at Derby. I think. Is that right?
Yeah. Yes, it would have been at Derby. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, Derby, right? So they could have said, I've got no disrespect for Derby, but Derby could have had the chance to play against some of those guys, which would be a once in a lifetime experience. Or London could have basically decided that this is the level of player that we need to win the game and pick them. Okay, that's and then the final. Now finals are great things. One of the biggest things about basketball in the UK, which is so different and may be about to be sacrificed on the altar of change, is the fact that teams actually have a real opportunity to win things.
Yeah.
Because you win 3 games or 4 games, and you're in the final, and you're on live TV, and you're 8,000 people there, and you've got the build-up, you've got the local TV covering you, and finals also provide a narrative to guide us historically.
Yeah.
Through the years, and any team that has won either a triple or a sweep, can I think properly say that they're a team that should be remembered.
Yeah.
Right. Sweeps, obviously, I'm slightly biased. Sweeps slightly more than triple, but even so,
if
you win 3 out of 4,
or you win 11 out of 12.
Or 11 out of 12, then historically, that gives us a kind of a marker to say you were dominant. Now they just basically pissed away a sweep in what they were interested in competing for it. But this is where it gets a bit murky for me, and a little bit. I'm a little bit. This is where the annoyance comes in as opposed to the irritation. Firstly, I'm delighted that they're not going to sweep, because it still means we were the last team.
Yeah. Potentially the last ever as well.
Potentially last forever. Well, this is what I'm going to get to, because there's all sorts of speculation that the trophy's going next year. Right. Now, it's aside of the fact that, we've just watched, Derby, basically handle Plymouth, and we had word Solent 3 years ago, which is kind of the trophy is the last kind of bastion of where the drawbridge isn't pulled up. Otherwise the drawbridge is. So take that to one side. At this point in time, the speculation is that that's going. We know that this league at this point in time has quite significant governance issues, right? I think they do, and I'll come to it in a second. But one of them, which has been raised regularly on social media and with interested and more thoughtful posters, is hang on, there's one club who owns half the equity in the league. That club has just basically, as far as I'm concerned, just reneged on the competition. It's just basically said this is a competition that to us is not relevant. It's far more important that we win the game at Cheshire on Sunday And it's because of the lineups it put out, you can always view. When we're 5 games clear in the league, then it is that we win a one-off game, which is 2 games from a final.
Yeah.
Right. So they've basically declared to all and sundry that this competition is not important to us. Then you get the fact that, in 3 weeks' time, we're going to get an announcement saying, "Oh, we're not going to have a trophy next year." And that's a speculation. That's not coming from there. No.
Well, Mark Woods put a tweet out 2 months ago or something about that the trophy was being got rid of. So it's not.
And you quite properly said that's actually got more history than the Cup. So what's going on there?
Well, yeah. So I'll make that argument now. The trophy is the official competition of the BBL. It existed from 1987 onwards. It has the entire history of the league in it. It is the league's competition. In some ways, the forerunner of the trophy, the Anglo-Scottish/British Masters, were the ones that created the British Basketball League, because they brought Scotland and England together to play a competition, which is where the British Basketball League came from. And it makes total and utter sense, as opposed to the Cup, which was created out of politics because Basketball England changed their eligibility rules. So the National Cup, the BBL teams withdrew from the National Cup, created their own BBL Cup so they could still have the competition that takes place and still have 4. And then, so its history starts in 2004. So when I'm sat there on Friday night in Leicester doing commentary, we run a VT at halftime, showing highlights of the trophy, of the cup final. Sorry, and Tahir rightly says in his narrative, 3 is the magic number. Leicester have won this competition 3 times. Leicester's social media will tell you they've won it 4 times because they won the National Cup. So they say we've won 4 cups, not 3. But in the press pack, it says 3. Pablo Cheeks, who's a historian of the game, been around forever watching the great Worthing days, is on commentary in Plymouth last week saying, "Oh, Herman Hareed scored 32 points in the cup final. That wasn't in the press pack. Something, something, something." And actually, he scored 32 points in the National Cup final. So I'm assuming when Hemel won the National Cup a month ago, Herman Hareed's record was in that press back, because that's where it belongs. So it's kind of untidy, the cup, and the trophy is not untidy. And the argument I get back, and I had this discussion with Roe in the car on Wednesday, the argument you get back for why you would keep the trophy and not the why you would keep the cup and not the trophy is because it's the first one of the season. Well, the BBL Trophy originally was being played in December and January in the final. So tick, you can move it. It doesn't matter because it's played in Birmingham. Well, the BBL Trophy final has been played in Birmingham more times than any other city. So you can move it back to Birmingham. It would be in keeping with the history. It began in Birmingham. The trophy messes with the schedule because it's later in the season. Well, it's only messes with the schedule because you don't put it in the same way you put the cup in at the beginning. So you can tick that one. Well, it's something about the format and the thing. Well, the format has changed for both knockout competitions. So you can change them again. Perfect. You can do whatever you want. So if you're getting rid of one trophy, one competition, it would make more sense from a historical point of view, from a contextual point of view, from a narrative point of view, to keep the one that has history all the way through and is quote unquote belonging to the league, as opposed to the one that was created for politics and is messy. And even people who've been around as long as Pablo Cheeks get confused as to which is which. End of rant. Carry on.
I'm on your side, Dan.
Yeah. Carry on.
I'm convinced, because I would say it makes no sense to get rid of either. I'll be honest.
Yeah. No, if you're asking me, my thing is, I would keep 2. Why would I keep 2? Because the 500 people who went from Ellesmere Port or Cheshire area last year in their T-shirts, who made the atmosphere in the Emirates Arena, that Cheshire are unlikely to win the league, and they're very unlikely to win the playoffs. Historically, the team that wins the league or finishes second tends to win the playoffs. It's very, very unlikely that a team from outside of the top 2/3 wins the playoffs. So those knockout competitions provide an opportunity for the teams lower down the league, whoever they are, whether it's Leicester in 2001 or Cheshire last season, to win something. And what that does is it creates great excitement in that local area, in the smaller markets, quote unquote, and therefore, and we're a football nation, and what do we have? We have two cup competitions, and I know I'm a season ticket holder at a football team, and I choose whether I want to go to the cup games or not because I have to pay for them extra. But I know what they are, and I understand them. And my team won one of them a couple of years ago, and your team might actually win something this year. It might happen, and that will be celebrated for days on end if it does happen. And that's kind of the point of those knockout competitions. It is the fact, it tells you the historically great, as you talked about, is if you can win 3 or 4 trophies, then you are in a historical bracket. But B, it also gives everybody else a chance. Anyway, that's my personal thing. But nobody cares what I think. If we get rid of one, we get rid of one. I just say get rid of the one that's complicated to explain rather than the one that isn't. Anyway, carry on.
Well, they should care what you think because you know about it. And knowledge is something that's important. By the way, if Newcastle beat Manchester United in the Carabao Cup finalists, City will be drunk for a fortnight.
Yeah. It's on a Sunday as well. Are we pushing Sunday night breakdown into about a Wednesday or something?
Wednesday. This place is very whatever. So that brings us on to the whole governance thing a bit. So we've got the club, which is run by the organisation which has 45% of the equity in the league, which is basically punting on the trophy and saying we're not bothered about winning it. That's not good. But it goes further, right? At this point in time, the BBL, and I got stuck into GB basketball, and I've got stuck into Basketball England, so I'm also going to allow myself to get stuck into the BBL at the moment a little bit as well, because of the things that this kind of brings about, right? The BBL's governance problem, it has 10 clubs, okay? Obviously, London are run by 777, they own 45% of the equity in the league. Manchester are run by the league, they don't have an owner at the moment. Plymouth are effectively run by the league. They have a figurehead in Plymouth, but the league owns the vast majority of their shares. I don't know the exact numbers. Okay. If London had gone to Manchester and decided that they didn't want to win that game because Manchester needed the income more, because it wasn't important to them, we have a situation where a team being owned by a club being owned by a team which has a significant interest in the league getting stronger and the revenues of the league improving, and therefore the sale of a Manchester team, which is currently unowned, to a significant buyer, going and playing a competitive game in Manchester, not wanting to win it as an organisation. Now, the situation that we're in would not be tolerated in any other sports. Okay, you cannot have a situation whereby the league is de facto running 2.5 teams, 3 teams. Well, they say the league, 777 are not the league. There's a structure, there's an executive board, there's a board and all that stuff. So just take London out of it for a second. But there's 2 other teams that are basically being run by the league. That is a conflict of interest everywhere you look. Right now, it happened in the NBA many years ago. David Stern had to take over, I think it was New Orleans, and he actually cancelled a trade with Chris Paul because he thought it wasn't equitable. And the league had to step in and do that, and they had to do that to make a point that just because this group hasn't got an owner, we're not going to allow them to be run over. It's of real. When you go to a basketball game, you go to any sports game, you can't have you can't have the same person owning 2 clubs in the Premier League. You can't have the same person owning 2 county cricket clubs or 2 rugby clubs, the same entity. You have to have absolute transparency and governance. At the moment, we have none in relation to the way that the league is run. Now, this is a problem. This isn't about the new CEO, because Aaron Radon has to do the job as dictated to him by the clubs. His job is to build it. His job is not to run it. He's not Stern. He's not Silver. He's not. Even them. They are beholden to the clubs. But it is of significant concern to me that when you get a situation like this, because as I say, London's organisation did not want to win this game.
Because there's another element.
That opens up an enormous can of worms.
Yeah. There's another element to this. There's
They
another
never thought we'd
element.
get to that point.
There's another element to this, which is Leicester were told last year that they couldn't rest players after they won the league. You know, we've seen it happen in years gone by where they played Charnwood and
rubbish,
Newcastle stuff. And Leicester were told, and I think they were threatened with a fine. I can't remember. I had a conversation, and this is what I was told. Then there was a game I did. I think it was 2 years ago, where Leicester were playing London in the final game of a cup group game that meant nothing. There was no impact. So both coaches were keen to basically not quite Charnwood versus Barking, but somewhere, and they were told they weren't allowed to do that because of the integrity of the competition. Now, in this situation, 3 guys are out injured, 1 guy is suspended, so you sort of go, well, that's fine, but then still not everybody played. Well, so how does those two things marry up?
Well, in relation to how, well, it doesn't. You know, in relation to the guys that they've got on the team sheet, they've got to put 8 on the team sheet.
Yeah.
They put 8 senior players who've been practicing all year.
Yeah.
I've got no problem with that. They can put on whoever they want on the team sheet. I got no problem with that. And I don't think it's something that, I think it's very difficult for any, you know, I'm not suggesting that there's a sanction here that can appropriately be taken. No. I disagreed, by the way, with the decisions to say, you know, those things you're talking about, you know.
No, me too. I disagree with them too. Yeah.
I think it's just totally wrong. You know, ultimately, and London can put whoever they want on the team sheet, and they did, and I've got no problem with them putting those 8 guys on the team sheet. None at all. That's all they're obligated to do. What I've got a problem with is that when it came to when they had a real, and if they lost this game by 20, we're not having this conversation. Yeah, we're just moving on and saying that was their decision. That's fine, right? But the reality is that they got to a point in this game where that game, everybody knows that they could have won it, that they should have won it, and the reality is the coach did not coach to win it, right? And I can say that as somebody who's watched this, who's been around basketball for 30 years, and has watched games, has coached games, and all, has made. You know, there were too many decisions that could have been made to improve your odds of winning the game that were not made, right? When you throw that together with the weekend lineup, when you throw that together with a backcourt that's 2 of 14 with 11 turnovers, and a backcourt coming off the bench that's destroying the opposition in 10 minutes, when you put that in with timeouts, that's it's non-negotiable to me. That is what happened. Coaches under orders, basically, not to lose, but to do nothing to assist winning, right? Now that creates all sorts of issues with the players. It creates all sorts of issues for the sport. You know, you are entitled to expect, as what going to watch an entertainment product, you're entitled to expect, from my perspective, once the game starts, once the ball is tossed up, that everybody should be doing everything they can to win. We played those games against, when we were in the sweep in 14-15, we played Cheshire and Leicester after we'd won the league, and we were knackered. We had we produced 4 kids from the Northumbria program, you know, Gregor Gray, Jack Wilson, Jack Thompson, all that stuff, because we literally, we had a couple of guys who probably could have played, but, you know, we played with 3.5 senior players. Yeah. Right? But I'll tell you something, when that ball went up, we tried to win.
Yeah, well, the same, you go back to Leicester played after winning the league at Worcester with Connor Washington and the Charnwood team, basically, and had a lost by about 6 or something. You know, there's no doubt.
You're coaching to win. Yeah. I remember speaking to Fletcher at half time in that game, because it was only him and Charles and somebody, and maybe one of the other senior guys playing, saying, Fletcher, we need you to score. But he said, I'm trying to get these guys involved. So, you know, it was against Cheshire, and that was a Taylor King team, so it was a good team we were playing against. And we were trying to win. You know, the score doesn't matter, but once your innate competitiveness kicks in, you're trying to win. When that is not there from the whole unit on the court, and that includes the people on the bench, that is a problem. And that's why I don't get, and I debunk, and I do not accept what Ryan Schmidt is saying about, you know, we felt it was right to give those kids a chance to win the game. Well, that's fine, but Josh Wardhibbert isn't a kid, and you left him guarding somebody who's 6'10" when you've got a centre on the bench. You've got a timeout you can call to give them a play to run. You didn't call it. I'm calling it out. I just don't think it's right. But as I say, where does that bring us in relation to governance, in relation to teams picking and choosing which which games they want to win, which games they want to lose. I mean, look, let's go full on, crackpot conspiracy theorist stuff here, right? What does the league want? Final in Glasgow. Does it want London v London like it was 3 years ago? No. Does it prefer Glasgow playing in a final in Glasgow to sell tickets?
Yeah.
That's fine. And I'm saying full on conspiracy theory.
Yeah.
When you take into account
I 100%.
The league is
I agree with you. The counter argument to that is they've been selling tickets for this competition for over a year, and which two teams get in, it doesn't matter. It changes the atmosphere. It matters to a degree, because if Cheshire get in, they last year, because they haven't been in the final for a few years, they'll bring 500, and it's not a million miles from Cheshire. So Leicester brought a lot more people to the final than London did in the cup final, because it's closer. They've got a more mature fan base, etc.
And I agree with you, because I don't, because I'm not a conspiracy theorist, right? But it's the appearance. It's the stuff. Right.
It goes back to the old National Cup, where Sheffield made the final every year, and it was in Sheffield Arena, and they used to get a plum draw every year, and it looked like it was rigged. Whether it was rigged or not, it didn't matter. It just looked like it.
None of this matters.
Or in the old women's National Cup, we used to get Sheffield and Ronda in the final every year, and it's like, what, they've never been drawn in the semi-final once.
Well, and but none of this matters if London make the adjustments and still lose. In that game.
Yeah.
None of it matters to me.
Yeah.
If Caboza might make that shot and they win, and everyone's saying what a genius. But the reality is, that is the first time this season, and I don't buy that. I'm afraid the too many games or the.
If they'd done it the other way around,
somebody else to win a trophy, so it doesn't look like that. You've got 15 players. The whole sense of dominating for a season, the memorableness of a season comes from winning in adversity. I get that they're playing 18 more games, but they've got 50 players. Right. You look back and the games that you enjoy the most are the games. Thinking back, whereby I think, Jesus, I don't know how we won that. We went to Plymouth with no guards and and no head coach. And the Plymouth guys are warming up, and there's Fletcher, Andre Jones, Drew Lasker sat on the bench, and Fab's back in Newcastle with Achilles done. And I'm thinking, oh, well, who's my point guard? Andy Thompson or Scott Martin? We won that game. And it's like that is that is an accomplishment which is far greater than winning X 500 games. Just winning that game, which helped us ultimately to win the league. If you want to be, you want to have all the resources in the world, and don't start complaining to me about too many games. Don't start, and even then, don't prioritize a league game which you can afford to lose over a one-off competition game which you can't.
That's, as I say, if they'd done it the other way around, I don't think we'd have spent more than a couple of minutes talking about it.
No, and then justify that on the basis, it's important that these guys got some experience in a one-off game. Well, which guys? Two of them, Bradley Caboza and three, Comagum, Caboza, and Zamalko Belucciumi. Three guys. That's it. Right, in a one-off game. What? It's not, you can't do that in the league game and see what you've got with them. No, it doesn't pass the smell test. And so that's probably more so than what happened. That is more of an issue for me, is that I feel like we're being gaslit in relation to what is going on. I don't know if there's some form of concern in 777 that if London win everything by too much, there'll be calls to they win the sweep and they do it and they dominate everybody, then there'll be calls to kind of rein in the spending or something to bring it back. So I don't know if they're playing a long-term game in relation to that. Maybe bring a salary cap back in because we can't have, the balance, the competitive balance has been too done. So they say, well, we've lost in the trophy, you see, can't complain, somebody else won. I don't know. We also know that, to be frank, London are running on an operation which is very different to anything probably you or I have ever seen in the BBL, insofar as they have a proper GM.
Yeah.
We've never we've never officially had GMs in this country, really.
Well, you had people
like
think
about it, going back
Rick
30
Taylor
years.
and Jay Goldberg and people like that.
Yeah, maybe that's going back.
It's
but
slightly
they
different. It was slightly
were,
different. It was slightly.
I don't think they were. That's not a basketball. Rick Taylor was a basketball coach, was he?
No, he wasn't. No,
No, and then
no,
Brett Burnham was. So I'm talking about basketball GMs bringing in the American. Now that has already led to a level of dysfunction at London, because we know what happened last year. They went through 3 coaches. They went through Vince, then they went through James Veer, which in a very strange kind of set of circumstances, about who was he playing, who wasn't he playing, was he actually coaching the team, or was he being told who had to play? And he eventually walked away for reasons which had never ever been satisfactorily explained. And then they ended up with a stopgap coach with Ryan Schmidt coaching from behind stories in relation to the dysfunction between the GM and the situation there. We're out there this year. Now you've got a situation whereby they may be taking a decision which they think is best organizationally, best financially, whatever. But the word came down that if we lose this game, it does not matter, and we do not need to impact that game the way that we need to do the things that we do to win it. And that's a problem. That's what annoys me. That's what irritates me. It is, I think it's disrespectful to the competition, but that's always a bit kind of a cliched argument for me. Your team, you can put whatever team out you want, and whoever wins the competition earns it. I don't do asterisks. If you win, you win. If you don't, you don't. But what we're in murky waters in relation to governance. The last thing that can happen, that this league can afford, is any suggestion that the 2 teams, once that ball is thrown up in the air, are not entirely committed to doing everything they can to win. And I'm afraid I'll just put that suggestion out there. And if you agree with it, you agree with it. If you don't, you don't. But if you agree with it, I would hope that the first thing that people do in the league, is look at clearing up the potential competitive conflicts of interest which are arising as we speak in relation to this type of stuff. And if the answer is, I'm afraid, the stopgap, well, we've been doing this for 35 years, but we're just going to get rid of the trophy because, to be honest, we don't want the team playing in Europe to play 3 extra games. Well, that's for me, that's not an answer. It's not even a sticking plaster. It's a sop. Let's just change the system. Let's make it easier to understand. With all due respect, bollocks, play every game to win. And if you don't play every game to win, then to me, basketball karma will get you in the end. So they're not going to be a sweep team. They should have been a sweep team. They've, I think, made a conscious decision that it wasn't that important to them to sweep. They might be right in due course. They have that decision. That's their decision. I do think it's somewhat unfortunate. It's just not the way. Not the way I've grown up in any sport. It's not the way I've grown up around basketball, but certainly in relation to football, in relation to any sport I've been involved in. It's just not the way I could conceive of proceeding. And I guarantee if you said to the other 9 coaches in the league, they would say exactly the same. They're not, they are trying to win it. If once that ball goes up, you try and win in every way, shape, or form. And sorry, Dan, the final thing is this development of young player stuff. Well, Willichume is probably going to go off to college. He's 18. He may stay. I don't know. But he's not. If they're getting to EuroLeague, realistically, he's not going to play many minutes for them. Kaboza has got a lot of work to do, right? And I don't think you develop a guy by basically playing him out of position for 34 minutes where he's having a nightmare and he can't get the ball over half court or he's turning the ball over. I don't think that was a development point. I think if you want to develop him, you put him in a position around the point guard, you let him play off a point guard. And Komagum is solid, but he's out of college, so he's a first year pro out of college. So he's just described as a young guy, but he's played 4 years in American college, So, and then the other 2, Ward Hibbert and Solowadi, are anything but. I don't buy that either. Just don't buy that argument either. But best way, get through the semi-finals, beat Derby, then put them in the final. Kaboza actually came to light in the final last year.
Yeah, he did.
Well, he's not going to have that opportunity this year because they didn't want it. And so what a better way if you want to develop them, have them play in front of 6,000 people in a final. Just get there, just win. Sorry, I've had enough now.
Yeah, same. Let's just throw the stats out that were worth noting. They were 0 for 14 from 3, Caledonia. The last team to win a game with no 3-pointers was Manchester, who beat Bristol 66-59 in 2020, December 2020. It's only the 7th time since 2008 somebody's won with no 3-pointers. This was the 3rd lowest scoring game in BBL history. Sheffield 47, Doncaster 53 in 1994, Leicester 60, Sheffield 40 in October 2013, and 52 by Caledonia was the lowest score that a team has won a game with. I should probably give the scorers as well.
Played very well.
Hey?
Sorry, yeah, no, Durham played very well.
Durham, yeah.
Durham,
9 of 15, 24.6 rebounds. Almost with 8 was the next best, and he fouled out with 6 minutes ago, or more than that, maybe. Ward Hibbett, 14 and 8. Urban in 7 minutes was their second highest scorer with 7.
7 minutes.
Yeah, and
how many games? How many games has Urban played in that last month? He's hardly played. He's been deregistered for about 7 minutes.
12 minutes, 7 points. Sorry if I said that the wrong way around.
Sorry.
12 minutes, 7 points.
Minutes.
And they were 16 of 51 shooting. A lot of bricks in the first half from both teams, to be fair. Right, let's park that now. Leicester Riders 78, Sheffield Sharks 79. No Pat Whelan with the toe injury. Menz is still in the starting lineup. Love in as opposed to loving. Love in the 5 for instead of Whelan. This was similar to the league game that these two teams had at the Morningside earlier this season, where Cook was doing all of Sheffield's scoring early on, but the teams were still trading baskets. It was a 1-point game. 2021 high scoring after 7 minutes.
Yeah, well, kind of. There are certain, I've got my saying of, you lose one play, generally improve. That doesn't apply when it's the best shooter in the league. Is subtraction by subtraction. That's a problem for Leicester, and as a result, it actually results in a little bit more of a knock-on impact as well. Oh God, it's nice to get better basketball, isn't it?
Yeah.
A knock-on impact as well, because Mackenzie started, but he started at the 2 guard, and Leicester are generally a team who don't really share the point guard kind of responsibilities much. Generally, if you're handling. So Love starts. So Love comes in, but that then shifts Mackenzie off to the 2, which means the timing on a lot of their screen and rolls is very different in relation to the stuff that they're used to running. So it has a kind of a double knock-on effect. And Love's obviously only been there like three weeks, so it's tough. Then on top of that, at the end of the day, Leicester still have this ongoing issue in the middle this year. And Cook destroyed Menzies early on. Menzies made a couple of shots at the other end, but Menzies could guard him. And Menzies played 5 minutes each half, and basically Cook scored him every time he got the ball. And so that's a very good now with Sheffield at times this year, they've been very, as you said, very stagnant. You throw it to Cook, and then Cook sits down after 5 minutes, and okay, what next? Well, their lineup changes have kind of aided their fluidity in relation to their scoring, so they weren't in that situation in this game, and they were knocking down shots, But by Bennett Cook establishing himself the way he did, and he scored with hooks, and he scored with floaters, and basically, in the second half, they had to start doubling him as a result. That gave Sheffield a foothold in the game, and with that foothold in the game, it then became very much a kind of a game of cat and mouse in relation to who's going to make shots, who's going to have a run, because neither team was able to properly impose their defense on the other. And Sheffield are actually, they're comfortably better offensively than they were before Christmas. I'm not sure that they're better defensively. That's just because of the nature of the players that they brought in. Some of the lineups that they're running now are smaller. At times they're in 3 guards, and their help side isn't quite what it was. So what we had was a little bit of kind of a mini shootout going on. It was a question of kind of who's going to make the most shots when it matters.
So both teams had a lead of about 6 points or so through this game, but they never got it away. And as you say, it was a sort of it's just a bit back and forth. So I almost want to spin it through to the to the end of the game. And
just before you do that, just because of something that interested me in this game. Firstly, around the third, because obviously I'd been watching Sheffield and Newcastle the week before, and about the third quarter, I think the end of the third quarter of that game was about 58-62 or something like that, 64-60. And it was basically exactly the same in this game. The scores were almost identical. And you're waiting to see, basically at Newcastle, Sheffield went through a 7-minute drought, and you didn't know where the ball was meant to be going, and they were kind of a bit of a disorganized mess, to be honest. And basically the game kind of just drifted away from them. And what I thought in the fourth quarter was that they'd really taken that to heart. I thought Atiba really got it really worked on what he needed, and he also made some personnel decisions. He started, he was far more willing to go with the three guards, Ramsey, Glasgow, and Nelson. He basically benched Flowers in the second. And I thought Sheffield were better for it in the first half. Now he came in, knocked down a 3, then he chucked up another 3 threes, missed them all, waved his arms a bit, blocked the shot, and kind of waved his arms a bit more, and then a few looks over his shoulder. And I just don't, I don't see him as a fit for them. I think Atiba kind of decided that as well. So if you're going to win in Leicester, you've got to go with guys who are into it. And I thought Glasgow was excellent in this game. Ramsey's a little bit up and down, but he gives you what he gives you. He's still
foul trouble as well with him.
Foul trouble in the league, and his decision making not right. But what Sheffield did in the fourth quarter from about the 5-minute mark on was it basically ran the same play. And Glasgow brought the ball. We threw it to Coke at the top. Routinho screened down. Nelson came up, screen and roll with Coke on the left side for Nelson to get to the middle. They ran it about 4 or 5 times in a row, which means that's coaching. That's what the coaches decided. This is what we're going to run when it matters. Now, they didn't have that at Newcastle the week before. Newcastle the week before, it was your turn, my turn, what's going on, who we're doing. Okay. And so I was impressed with that. There was kind of a sequence there was a few calls that actually I thought Sheffield didn't get kind of in the middle of the fourth quarter. There was one where there was a push from behind. There was a push called on a tip from behind in transition, which I thought was pretty awful. There was then an unsportsmanlike foul call, which I didn't think was much of an unsportsmanlike foul, and I'll come to that in a second. And then Bennett Cook got hacked on the screen roll with Nelson and didn't get a call either. And I thought the unsportsmanlike one has happened 3 times this week, and it's beginning to frustrate me. It's the situation whereby the refs are almost predisposed after a quick turnover. In the backcourt, if there's a coming together, and maybe a reach in or an elbow or an arm or a shoulder, it doesn't take much, just a hand in. That's it. There's a predisposition towards calling that unsportsmanlike, and I get that. But the problem is that is a result. It's a conflagration of the 2 rules. Okay, if that's the last man, absolutely. If it's from the side or behind, it's the last man. It's an automatic unsportsmanlike, right? But we've got this new rule this year about take fouls, which is basically slowing down the fast break, is also going to be one. Now, the one that Nichols got, I think it was kept by Nichols, got called for in this game. There was a turnover. And he did reach in, but he reached in towards the ball, and there was another man behind him.
Okay? Now, my reading of the rules is that's an unsportsmanlike foul.
Why?
It's not from behind.
No, but there was another man behind him.
But it's an attempt to stop the fast break.
I thought it was an attempt to play on the ball.
Well,
I think if it's an attempt to play on the ball, it's resulted in stopping the fast break. But does it? And there was one today, and we'll get to with Elvisi Dusha against Derby, exactly the same, where there was a reach in on the wing.
I thought that was unsportsmanlike as well.
But I don't. Because I think that is a result of, and you might be right and I might be wrong, but that's a result of, we're used to it being called now because it's a last man. But if that isn't the last man, then my understanding is, and I might be wrong, that the foul's being called not because it stops a fast break, but because the referee judges it was a deliberate act to stop a fast break.
I'll double check it. I'll double check
double
it.
check
But
that.
both of those to me look like unsportsmanlike fouls. You've
That's because you've been brainwashed by it.
yeah. Well,
This is
basically,
like,
and because before that, I watched so much European basketball where they used to make that foul and it'd be a sideline ball. I was like, Jesus, can we stop this
but
and
in the
actually have
Euro
them
Cup
running?
now, when they go into videos, the refs aren't calling those. A lot
No,
of the
there's
refs
been a
aren't calling
couple.
them.
There's been a couple actually this year that I've been certain were going to be unsportsmanlike and weren't.
Yeah,
Anyway,
and
you've
that's where I
jumped.
put the rule from. So anyway, I
Yeah.
thought Sheffield got the rough end of a couple of calls, and I think they got one back, and then it came down to quite an entertaining last 2 minutes.
So you've jumped a little bit ahead. So
Right, sorry.
Glasgow makes a 3-point, an 18% 3-point shooter makes 3-pointer in the corner to 18 to
Really?
to put them up 68-74 with 4 to play. Jackson makes a tough one in the corner 73-74. And then free throws for Glasgow and Nelson 73-78, just over 2 minutes to play. An incredible 3-pointer from Jackson, late shot clock, had to shuffle his feet about, hadn't quite got it right. 1:53 to go, 76-78. Then we get to the unsportsmanlike foul that we've just debated with 1:29 to go. Kimball McKenzie with 2 free throws, 78 apiece. Timeout Sheffield. Leicester obviously have the ball and run a play. Love steps into a nice looking 3-point shot. I'm sure that's kind of how they drew it up, but it didn't drop in.
If it was, I thought it was kind of an early shot. I think I was surprised Love was in the game and Connor wasn't, I'll be honest, at this point. Obviously Rob's figuring out what he's got with Carrington Love. I don't know, Connor's not played that many minutes since he came back. I'm not sure what
I think he was also 1 of 6 in that game as well. So
he was, but he's been there, he's done it, I mean, if it's it's you look at that box score, I'm surprised Connor plays 12 minutes, I'll be honest. Unless there's stuff I don't know about, which there probably is in relation to his health. So yeah, I didn't think that was the greatest shots by Love, but yeah, go on.
Nichols goes quick. At Nelson Hendry is straight up. He misses. Jackson with a runner at the other end. He misses, but Nelson Henry gets an offensive rebound. And then Loving late in the shot clock, pump fakes trying to get Ramsey to bite, but Ramsey knocks the ball loose, and then Nelson's fouled as he attacks the basket. And he goes to the free throw line with 44.8 seconds to go, makes 1 of 2, 78-79.
Yeah, I thought Sheffield played good defense, to be honest. I thought you're right, Jackson's a baller. I mean, Jackson really is a baller. I mean, he actually gave Leicester a shot at winning this game when probably it was done. And you just look at this, just his ability to take over games and to step up, and it's his 3rd year now, and that's kind of the progression of the player over the time. You're right about Glasgow, 18%. He was 38% last year. I wouldn't be guarding him like he's an 18% 3-point shooter if he was playing against me. So Sheffield's defense I thought was pretty good. They were pretty resilient. Leicester again, new combinations on the court to a certain degree. Whelan's not there, which is a massive difference in relation to floor spacing. So it means they've got to go a little bit more one-on-one. They're not really having much success, or they've really kind of stopped really throwing the ball to Nelson Henry. He's not getting the many touches at all, and they haven't really got a screen and roll guy going. So it's kind of down to Loving and Jackson to make shots and make plays at the end, and they tried to. 44 seconds to go, and Nelson makes the shot. Then I think Love steps on the sideline, doesn't he?
Well, we couldn't see it, could we? There's somebody sat on the front row, so we don't know. But that was what was called. His reaction suggests he didn't agree with that, but then you don't really look at your feet, do you, when you got the ball?
What I will say is they're generally ones that, if you're a ref, you really don't want to call that unless you
unless you do. 18 seconds to go. Ramsey round screen misses a 3. So Leicester have the ball, a shot clock switched off, and a shot to win. And Jackson gets to the top of the key, has Cook there, so he ends up having to sort of turn around and fall away. And it's one of them where it hits the front of the rim and goes up in the air. And some days those drop back down and in, and some days they drop forward and out.
Look, I mean, he's a very high percentage. I'll go back a little bit. I wasn't impressed with Ramsey's shot. Ramsey hasn't struck me as that kind of killer knockdown 3-point shooter, and he pulled up off a screen. They've given Nelson the ball for about 6 consecutive possessions, and Nelson was in a rhythm. And they've been getting Nelson the basketball. I'm not quite sure. This is the push me pull you having a new guard come in all the time. I thought that was a bad shot, a bad decision for Sheffield at that point in time. For me, Nelson has to have the basketball at that point. and they have to do what they're doing. And then they play good defense. They basically play good defense. They made Zach Jackson shoot a tough shot. Bennett Cook. And if you look at this, it's not like football whereby the best team often loses. I always think that the best team wins because it's got most points. It doesn't really matter how well you've played. It doesn't matter how wonderfully you've thrown the ball around the court or how how nice it looks or anything like that. Generally, the best team wins because it makes the most plays and the most adjustments. I thought Sheffield were really, really good in this game. They defended diligently. Atiba chopped his rotation down, which helped him. Retino was again a little bit more aggressive off the dribble. Kipper Nichols was, took over from Cook and was scoring the basketball, and they couldn't really guard him. Leicester's bench struggled, and Rob was searching. He had Bowman in the first half, he had Walsh in the second half. Adekoya played a bit. Menzies started, but never came back after each of the two halves. Connor dropped in a little bit. Kimball's playing the point. Kimball's playing the two. And Leicester are just a little bit in flux. We've got a few moving parts, and the biggest problem was
and not aided in the first. Not aided in the first half, but that by the fact they hadn't got Whelan and Jackson got a couple of early fouls. So
my logic on that.
Yeah, no.
Let them play. Let them play. It's tough but Rob's probably thinking actually, I can't let him play because I haven't got Whelan.
And having him in the fourth quarter make those threes is what potentially could have won them.
Yeah, that's right. So it's always it's the gambler who rolls the dice and wins. Remember, it's the gambler who rolls the dice and loses. Well, never mind.
If that last shot drops in, then it's a genius move, isn't it?
Genius move. Yeah, it was a good player, but Sheffield. Well, I mean, it's remarkable. It's their second win in 11 games. What a place to win, and they get a win on the floor that they generally don't win. So they can move forward. I mean, it'll be interesting to see.
Last time they won there, they beat Charnwood.
All right, boom, boom. It'll be interesting to see what happens with Flowers because he didn't play, and I don't necessarily see him as being kind of the guy who's going to be waving a towel on the bench from what I've seen of him if he's not playing. So they're going to have a decision to make there, I think. Either he plays and you get something out of him, or it's a Donovan Johnson kind of addition by subtraction. Leicester, they got to try and get ultimately they're going to need to have they got to look at the playoffs now because obviously the trophy's gone. They're probably not going to win the league, I think we can say. So they've got to look at acclimating Love. Basically their season, without high level point guard performances, they're not going to win the playoffs. I think that's probably where I would put it. Now, the problem is that they've got somebody who's playing at a high level at the point guard spot in Mackenzie, but who's also a real kind of before when they had Thornton, who was also a real impact player off the bench for them as well. I don't think. I mean, obviously, it's not sustainable for Mackenzie to be starting at the two because Whelan's going to be starting at the two. So that kind of forget that. So the question is Love going to earn the starting point guard job? And they may have to go through some growing pains to find that out. But the only way they're going to find it out if he plays. So they're stuck. Rob's stuck in that position of, well, actually, at this point in time, we're a better team with Kimball running the point and playing 34 minutes. But that team only has a ceiling of this high. Part of the guy on the bench, and I need to get us to this high if we're going to look at actually trying to win that. And I think they got stuck in that a little bit in this game. So they've got some holes, and he was reaching for players, and as I say, they got to get more at the centre spot. Menzies, Menzies is, there's one guy in the league that Menzies should be able to defend a little bit better. It's Cook.
To be fair to him, Cook was hitting those hook shots from a lot further out than
he was. But I just think
so. There's part of me goes, that's a pretty good shot there.
Yeah, it was. But once the guy's made two or three, I get it makes a 2 or 3. At that point, you stop catching the basketball right out there. He's going at you at that point. And at that point, you've got to say, okay, no more. And And he never came back in to play against anybody else. So it wasn't like,
Yeah.
oh, we'll give you a shot when Del Pesce's in the game or anything like that. He's in that starting lineup to eat up some of those minutes to guard other teams' starting centres. So he either got to be able to do it or he can't. Now, Coke's done that with multiple people this year. So, it's not a knock on him to a certain degree. It's not saying, oh, you can't do it. But there has to be something more out of him than that to eat up those minutes. That's the point. And maybe they'll get it, maybe they won't. But it's it's one thing if he's been asked to guard Rashad Hassan, which is different. Than Bennett Cook. Bennett Cook's a big body. He's technically skilled. He has nice touch. But Aaron Menzies got 2 centimeters on him, and you shouldn't be backing him down. And if he's shooting floaters, well, you've got to make him dribble a basketball, and then if he beats you a different way. But anyway, so they've got stuff to figure out. I think they will figure it out. I think that, but be interesting to see how they handle actually the rather unusual concept for Leicester of actually not really having that much to play for. Going down the stretch. They're so used to being right in the mix of it all the time.
A
slightly different kind of mindset. Almost as a coach, you've almost kind of got to take your foot off the pedal a little bit, because you can't sell to your players that game 32 in a 36-game season to finish second or third in the league is a vital, crucial, must-win game, because when you have to win, the season takes over itself. The urgency is created by what you're competing for, and they've never really had the situation like this. So even if they're in the trophy final, they could say, right, we got to get playing better, so we're peaking in the final. But they're not going to get to that now, so they're just like everybody else. So that'd be interesting.
Jackson with 18, Mackenzie 15, Loving 13, Leicester 4 of 23 from 3-point range. Nichols 8 of 12 for 19 points, Cook 9 of 12 for 18 points, and Rotino 10. Let's go.
I like this guy.
Yeah.
First Skyhook of the season. No, you should get Skyhook Claxon points for that.
You should.
The day after Kareem lost his leg, coming up with Skyhook. Good job.
Let's go to Saturday. Surrey Scorchers 74, Cheshire Phoenix 93. A debut for Maury Archibald. Hot start from the Knicks, all their usual stuff. Evans and Austin getting to the basket, the odd 3, and they're 11 points up inside 5 minutes.
Yeah, so he started the first quarter and the third quarter pretty abysmal. In the first quarter, they were able to pull it back, and in the third quarter, they weren't. Difficult. I mean, obviously, Daniels has gone. Archibald, first impressions, pretty solid. More of a combo, certainly not a point guard, but so it's actually someone who kind of fills in what Daniels was doing for them, probably with a bit more off the dribble. Good 3-point shooting stats. Has to load it up, so I don't think he shoots many bad ones. So I think that's probably why his percentage is high. But also has kind of a nice little pull-up as well. So I think he's going to help them. I'm not sure he's going to increase their ceiling tremendously, but he's going to help them. And I thought this game was, again, frustrated by Surrey. I've said that every week, but I'm frustrated by the lack of desperation in their play. I thought the way that they defended Will Neighbour was instructive, and that they really didn't. And you only have to do one thing to defend Will Neighbour primarily, in the scouting report, which is, you get into his airspace before he can shoot the basketball. Obviously, Cheshire are doing stuff to prevent people doing that, like flares off screens and all sorts of stuff. So they're not going to make it easy for you. So you have to be ultimately committed to it, to taking away that catch and shoot. Make him go down low, bang him around a bit in the post. If he makes a tough 2-point shot, you'll live with it. You might make them, that's fine. But you're going to make him earn his points. I didn't think they did that. I didn't think they defended the 3-point line with any real gusto all night. And they came back into the game with some offense. They started Kyle Carey in this game with a 2, which again is kind of another lineup change. Wang at the 3. Ryan Martin and Shaquem Johnson. Boban came in, gave them a bit of energy. Dobbs appears to have disappeared off the earth. I don't know if he's still there or not, but he's not been playing. I don't know if he's injured. He's not been announced as being injured. He hasn't played for months. I've just no idea what's going on with him at all. Teo came back, played 15 minutes, does what Teo does, knock down some shots. But but they just look like a team without. They didn't have the collective purpose that Cheshire had. I thought in that war in the second half. Austin and Evans are relentless. Offensively and defensively. They're not probably the most. I wouldn't say they're the most intrinsically talented backcourt in the league, but they're everywhere. You know, and they get that. And when Evans is making shots, and in this game,
he did,
like he did on Sunday against Newcastle, he made shots. Now he's only shooting 23% or 25% from the season for the three, but when he's making them, he becomes a heck of a tough cover because he's an irrational confidence guy. You know, it's going on, and you see who's going to make it. So I thought they kind of dominated the game in the third quarter, and that kind of took it away from.
So it went Archibald 3, Evans to the rim, and 1. They scored the first 13 points of the fourth quarter to 64-78. All told, from the last minute of the third, there was a 5-minute spell where they scored 18 of the 20 points that were scored and went from 1 point up 64-65 to 66-83, and that was basically.
Well, they do have this, they do have this ability because they score transition. We've talked about it. They score in transition, and the guards, if you're not in the help side, the guards will get a step on you and they'll attack the rim. And then they're a nicely put together team because Jack kind of fits them because he's a lower usage scorer. Neighbour and Teague we've talked about as being kind of spacers. Austin being relentless, and then all the other guys come off the bench and play within their roles. So it didn't surprise me that they won this game. Surrey, again, who's the man? You didn't see that in this game. Lawrence is back starting. He didn't play the last 2.5 minutes of the overtime game because he was injured, but he's back starting now. This time it was Carey at the 2. Bazumbru's still handling the basketball, and basically Cheshire are playing 20 feet off him. So he has to step up and start knocking down shots. If he wants to be a point guard in the BBL, he can't be allowing teams to play 10, 12 feet off you. And challenging you to shoot. There's probably only one guy who's ever managed to get away with that, and that's Callum Jones, and that's because Callum is so crafty in relation to everything else he does, and because he also has a 15-foot shot, which doesn't. So Luke Bazumbru is going to have to find a way of enticing the defenders to get out to him because he can't just play in transition all the time. He's going to have to. He can get to the rim on anybody, but you have to have somebody in front of you to be able to get to the rim on them. And so that kind of doesn't really fit. Bringing obviously Josh Steele's been a kind of a positive point for them.
He has.
Young guy who's talented, disciplined, knocks down threes. So he has. I think they're gonna have to find a role for him. But my impression with Surrey is just that they're done. I'm sorry. I just, they're done.
I watched this. I didn't watch this live. I watched it back this morning, and it was one of those where it just obviously I already know what the score is when I'm watching it back, but they do look like a team. I was reminded of what you said last week. I don't know how they bounced back from that. They did look like a team that was just waiting for the other to have a run.
It's just there's a lot of optimism, a lot of hope in what they do, as opposed to certainty. There's no force behind what they do. And Johnson, it's tough. They've changed a lot of players, and they've lost the point guard in Taylor. Obviously Jalen Ray wasn't playing in this game either, was he? If he was, I can't remember. I don't think he was. I haven't realised that until now. So that's why Carey started. So he's injured again. So that's another thing. So you're constantly juggling plates like that. But there comes a time whereby that doesn't cut it if Will Neighbour's standing there stroking outside. It just doesn't cut it. You can play it with more effort than that, and the efforts are the closeouts, the defensive movements, the extra steps that you take, the diving on the floor. That's the stuff that I just don't see enough of from them, and that's why I don't think that it's recoverable for them.
Martin, 17.7 rebounds. Wang, 12 points, although 3 of 14 shooting. Steele, 3 of 3 from behind the arc for 11. Evans, 10 for 16 shooting, 25.6 assists, 3 steals. Austin, 17.6 rebounds. Jack, 14. Archibald on debut with 10 points, 4 of 6 shooting, 14.5 minutes. They were 11 of 29 from 3-point range. Let's go through. So their defense carries on to at least the semi-final.
And that was the other reason. I mean, they were there last year, so there's 3 or 4 of them and so they know what it was last. They know how important it was last year. They know what a big triumph it was last year. That's probably the highlight of some of those guys' careers, because they don't win. People have to remember that all these players that you're seeing in the BBL, the vast majority of, well, virtually everybody has not won anything in college.
Yeah. I'm sure Larry Austin said that was the first trophy he'd won.
Yeah,
last year.
Rod Glasgow, when we won the trophy in 2019 against Solent, he said that's the first trophy I've ever won. He had a 4-year career at Virginia Military. He's been played pro 3, 4, 5 years. First trophy he'd ever won, and because the reality is that there's very few winners in college basketball. And before that, they're in high school, and whilst that even the high school is horrendously competitive. So to be a state winner in that is unusual, and those guys generally aren't playing the BBL. So,
well, I was tagged into a tweet from I was about to say James Veer, Steve Veer, about how many people had won a high school state championship, and I didn't know the answer to it, but some of the other people tagged in did, and there weren't many.
I remember actually we won the league 13-14. Malik Cook played South Carolina. He said that's the first time I've ever won anything. In the bar at Surrey Sports Park, and it's like, wow, because you think these guys they're all so talented, they're so skilled, but the opportunity to actually
the problem with American sport is there's only ever one winner.
It's very, 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 very
you know
rare.
what I mean? It's sort of like, I know that sounds counterintuitive, but actually
the opportunities to actually aren't there, and that's another reason for keeping for back to your trophy rant. For all that. So, I thought they would that kind of institutional knowledge of the victory of last year. I did think that would make a difference. It did, and Larry Austin in particular, I think is motivated to go back and to do it again.
Definitely,
Good for them.
Good for them indeed. So let's go to Sunday's games. Plymouth City Patriots 89, Derby Trailblazers 99. No Jawan Daniels. I think he was ill, I think Paul said. But
then somebody else pointed out on Twitter that Will White had his shirt on with his name taped over.
Well, I hadn't clocked the number.
No,
I saw the name was taped over, but I didn't clock the number.
As I say, whenever you get into new player, 2 does a lot of shoulder shrugs, and 3 PJ hasn't got him on the bench without any announcement, my antennae are aroused. So I'm not sure. I didn't. We'll see.
So there was basically no stops for Plymouth at the beginning of the game. Smith was scoring, Brueggemann, Dietrich hitting shots. They were getting out in transition, and they had 24 points after 6 minutes, Derby, and a comfortable lead at sort of that 8 to 10 margin.
They were playing harder.
Yeah.
Let's be blunt. They were playing harder than Plymouth. They ran the floor. Smith was the first guy down the court every time. They're an accomplished offensive team. It's quite clear. Brueggemann played a little bit in the Lev Gold in Spain, so he's a proper point guard. And obviously Smith's somebody we've known in this country for a long time. He was up in Newcastle for years with Team Northumbria and Mark Stootle. And it's somewhat of a surprise that, because he did the same thing as Surrey last year in the trophy.
Yeah, he did. 36.
It's somewhat of a surprise that no one's picked him up in the BBL or elsewhere. To be honest, the knock on him obviously it's always been that he's 6'4", 6'5", as opposed to 6'7", 6'8". But there was a guy at Solent when we won the trophy against him, Travis Charles, was exactly the same. He's a hell of a player. If it doesn't matter if you're only 6'6", he struggled to guard CJ Gettys, but most did. But if you're going to knock down a 15-foot jump shot with regularity, that can be a weapon that they use. So in EBL, he is basically a guy who outworks people. He's he runs harder. He's able to score the ball, and because he's undersized, it isn't quite as significant because they play at a fast pace. They get up and down. Thompson gets up and down. Brueggemann runs the team. Dietrich spots up in the corners, etc. So they're good. And let's be honest, they're 13-2. So this isn't a kind of team of scrubs or a team who's jolly from St Mirren. And then you've got the problem for Plymouth. 2 problems basically. One, the last time Plymouth won a game that wasn't against St Mirren was before Christmas. That was December 18th. Since then, they've lost 8 in a row, and only one, I think 2 of them have been by single digits. The rest of the team by double digits. So they're, they've really struggled with the loss of Williams and Simons, as we've talked about before. But then you have the added problem as well, that they all came off on a feel good last week.
Yeah.
London, and it's great. It's one of these kind of in the NBA, they call them fake comebacks. You're down by 25 and you come back to 4 and you don't quite cross it, but you think, oh, hey, we're getting somewhere. The momentum's in our favor. Well, one of my 10 commandments in the BBL is that momentum between games is nonsense. Do we any good? Momentum in between games is basically overconfidence, right? So in overconfidence is something you need to avoid at all costs. The time that you're most vulnerable is when you've won multiple games in a row, or when you're feeling good about yourself and you're coming off things, because the little things that you would otherwise do, you don't do. So that was, I think, why they obviously they started different again. He started Gadsden, he started the 3 guards again with Hawthorne. Hawthorne played 12 minutes, had 1 point, which ain't great against an ABL team. He had to bring, and then in the second half, he had to start with.
I think Brandon. He was 0 for 6 or something.
Yeah, in the second half, he had to start with Brandon and Bell instead. But what it was a shootout, and Derby. Obviously Derby's energy and their offensive execution was excellent. Defensively, they threw a lot of things in there. They threw man in, they threw bits of zone in. They had times kind of even moved back towards kind of local league, kind of, if you're going to make that shot, we'll live with it. Well, so you see Dusha, you might want to guard him. So they didn't guard the 3-point line. They guarded the 3-point line like they were playing against a team who wasn't full of pro players, to be honest. And that gave Plymouth a way back into it. But ultimately, Malcolm Smith was like watching kind of what Rashad Hassan does to all guys who are bigger than him.
Yeah.
Which is getting around the basket and score. And Malcolm Smith probably gave up an inch to Rashad Hassan. So it's the first time Rashad Hassan's probably been oversized at the centre spot all season. And Malcolm Smith was just great. He just outworked them, and he got to the rim and he attacked and he knocked down shots, and they played like it mattered. They played like they believed it mattered, and they played like they believed they could win. And it was their showpiece game, and and they wanted to continue. And now they've got a home game in the semi-final. And Plymouth, I thought, when PJ brought Will White in with 2.5 minutes to go, that was kind of the white flag. Sorry, that was a pun. White flag.
Got you. Yeah. You just jumped through to the end. You've missed all of the game. Let me just run through the game here because you missed it all. Dietrich May Thompson Donaldson, channeling a bit of Inner Dipper there with the glasses on, I thought, Eric Donaldson.
Yeah. I'm assuming it's his son, is it?
Yeah, it is. Yeah,
absolutely. Dip was bigger, wasn't he?
Dip was much bigger, Dip was much bigger.
6, 8.
But no, it's a bit random. I remember Sydney being born, because random fact, myself and Dip both lived in the same flat, not at the same time. He was in there before me. But
for those who don't know, that's Robert Dip Donaldson.
Robert Donaldson, yes,
Robert Donaldson. And MBL and probably early days BBL legend,
and pre-BBL as well, because he goes back to Birmingham in the 80s as well.
And I think he was dipped because he short of a shoulder. He used to dip his shoulder. Is that right?
Wasn't it? He was Little Dipper. It was his brother. Did his brother play in the NBA and he was the Big Dipper, and then Robert was Little Dipper? James Donaldson. That's it.
Right. Okay.
So he was because James was 7 foot or something. No. I think James was 7 foot and Dip was like 6'10" or something, so he was the Little Dipper, and just everybody knew him as Dip. So anyway, sorry for it was just the glasses was like
absolutely.
So Derby are 15 ahead at halftime. They scored 19-0 on fast break points, by the way, in the first half.
Effort, isn't it? Effort and intensity. That's unacceptable.
Brandon Dusha, Bell, Dangakodo hit threes in the third quarter. They got it down to 6 and forced Derby, Matt Shaw, into a timeout. But then they sort of settled down a little bit, Derby, and regained their sort of equilibrium. Brandon then fouled out with 13 minutes to go.
68-69.
'Dusha and Gadsden hit some threes, and again it's back down to 168 71. But then Dietrich with the 3 on the third quarter buzzer makes it 6. Dusha takes that back at the start of the fourth, but Derby then went on a 12-2 run to go from 71-74 to 73-86, and that was basically the game.
I thought Derby did a great job in the fourth quarter because I thought the refs had a mad 3 minutes at the end of the fourth quarter. And I thought they missed about 3 or 4 calls in Plymouth's favour. Albeit there was a rather strange makeup call when Bell skied and blocked a layup, which was called a foul for some reason. But I thought, you could see there was at least, as I say, when you look at it, there was probably 3 calls which went against them, which shouldn't have. And I was waiting to see if it cracked them, and it did the opposite. They showed that they kept their composure, they kept their cool, and they played through. And I think it was an example of one of those teams that was actually just so locked in that it didn't really matter. They walked into that gym thinking we are going to win this game.
Yeah, they did. You could see it.
But that's not saying that's not of confidence or arrogance. That's just kind of a group mentality. When Raheem May Thompson is running back to block Issa Brown in transition, that type of thing. That is a mentality of, look, we've got nothing to fear here, but we are going to win this game, right? And when you have that feeling amongst your group, you can handle all sorts of breakdowns. You can handle all sorts of outside influences, all sorts of injustices, etc. Because you're unshakable, right? You can't. There are teams that don't have that. They think they have that, but then eventually they crack under the pressure. And seeing Malcolm Smith basically be their leader and seeing Ryan Bruggeman ran this game offensively. I mean, he got to wherever he wanted. He had 29. He got to the pull-up jump shot when he let it. He's one of these guys that when he's lined up to shoot it, everybody on the bench was hands were in the air because they knew it was going in. He absolutely offensively he just controlled it, and they got the ball to Smith. They threw it ahead, so they weren't playing conservatively. They weren't scared to shoot the ball. It was basically, it struck me as being I would say.
Well,
I would say they were offensively, they were certainly a BBL level team. Defensively, I'm not sure they are.
No,
down on size.
But if you score 99 points
and you play that hard,
then
you can make up for a lot. I think over the course of the season, I think they would need a little bit more size, and probably a little bit more off the dribble. But Plymouth are in a difficult place. As I say, they haven't won a meaningful game since before Christmas. The whole Daniels thing is slightly unusual. Just the vibe around them isn't good at this point. And they're probably, and as I say, apart from their fake comeback against London, really they've had nothing to shout about. So
and Derby will have looked at the game on Friday night and gone, London are out here. We've got a home game against Caledonia, whose away record isn't great, in our little gym.
Yeah, tell them to get there. Tell them not to get there before 6 o'clock. Too early. They'll not get in.
but they will go and they'll go. Well, Solent got to the final a couple of years ago. Why can't we?
Well, they can because offensively they're at that level and they're playing in their gym where they're hungry now. Now, what I will say is,
the other impressive thing worth noting actually is they played on Saturday night at Westminster, won by 21. So they're on the back of a back-to-back on the short turnaround with the early tip-off, and yet they didn't look like that in the fourth quarter. Sometimes teams
that's right. Yeah, I have to say, I'm going to come back to him again. Malcolm Smith. I mean, he if you looked at some of the guys in the BBL who think they're in shape, you look at Malcolm Smith. He is in shape. And he doesn't look like the guy I saw 5 years ago. I'll be honest, in relation to the way he's looked after his body as a professional. And no, I just think there's sometimes playing the night before in a warm-up game can kind of help you a little bit as well. And as I say, he threw in some zones and some stuff. The only thing I'd say about Caledonia is, okay, now you've got Patrick Taffy, Jeremiah Bailey, and Ali Fraser. They're all, even Bailey is probably taller than any guy on your team. Maybe outside of Raheem, but so they're going to have an issue with size. And they're probably not going to be able to run on Caledonia the way they ran on Plymouth. But that gym, as they played there, lines on the court, it's loud, good place to play. at home. They're used to playing there. It'll be a massive game. I hope we can get the cameras on it. I assume that they'll be.
They did the Wales game.
I didn't
So
watch it, sorry.
yeah.
No credit to them. Why not? I mean, look, at the end of the day, Sheffield, Cheshire, and Caledonia are mid-level BBL teams this year. So when I say mid-level, that's basically 4 to 7. 4 to 8. So there's no reason why highly motivated, talented NBL team can't take them there. This is what we've always had. We've always had these 4 or 5 teams in NBL who on a one-off occasion, and possibly even more than one-off occasion, can compete. And as I've said multiple times before, it's a failure of the professional basketball system and the structure below the BBL that they've not been able to develop with assistance from the authorities into clubs that can properly employ teams on a professional basis. They should be able to do so. They've got everything else that is there. You look, the coaching is there, the depth is there. Jonas Dietrich is a good basketball player. Bruggeman, and these are good players. Raheem Thompson could still be playing the BBL. There'll be reasons why, but personally, I'm sure why he's not. But it's not that far away from. But you can't expect them to be running a pro organization if they're going to play at places like Westminster in front of 30 people. And that's the failing of that's the failing of Basketball England. In relation to developing a meaningful second division in our country, we don't have it. We have meaningful clubs.
We
have meaningful clubs at the top, but then we've got kind of a mishmash of universities and clubs which play in front of very, very few players, very few players.
Dusha, 25.7 rebounds, 6 assists. Hassan, 10 of 14 for 25 points and 10 rebounds. Gadsden, 12 points. Smith, 36 points and 5 rebounds. Coming into this game, he averaged 20 points a game in the BBL Trophy, so that will have gone up. Bruggeman, 22 points, 9 assists, and 4 steals, and Dietrich, 15 points and 5 rebounds. Final game of the day, Cheshire Phoenix, 65, London Lions, 86. No Larry Austin due to a hamstring problem. Zubcic and Kufos were back for the Lions. Thought this was going to end 0-0 at the beginning there. Nobody could score in the first 2 or 3 minutes of the game. Then Nelson got the scoreboard ticking, pushing it out to a 15-6 lead in favour of London.
Yeah, Zubcic and Kufos were back, and you could also argue that Best and Nelson.
Yeah. And Sharma.
Look, London do have a murderer's row of games coming up. Coach said he's right. They didn't start Nelson in this game. They started Solowade, which again is another change. So, and obviously they don't have Taylor to calm everybody down to sort things out, and they don't have Decker to basically be their cheat code and bail them out whenever there's a problem. So against that background, they're going to have to play properly. They're going to have to play well to beat teams. They can't just roll up and expect to win. And Cheshire are tough, albeit they're not as tough without Larry Austin, no question. And the reality was in this game, Archibald had to play more, and because Austin wasn't playing, and that hurt them because Archibald's only been there 2 weeks, and London's a different team to come up against than Surrey on the Saturday night. And so obviously they played on the Saturday night as well. So that all kind of adds in. London looked out of rhythm early, out of sync, and you probably understand that because their point guard isn't playing. And there comes a time whereby even in the NBA, these guys play 82 games, but they generally have a fairly set starting routine, starting line. And London just don't. I mean, they just don't. It's every day is a different group, and what they're hoping for is both their talent and their depth can kind of handle the lack of cohesion that causes. It doesn't matter. We don't need to have the same starting 5 every week because we've got so much talent and so much depth that's going to win out in the end. Say they got 15 players, every other team in the league's got 8 players. They got 15, 8 or 9 players, and they've got 15. I say that pro players, so that's the way they've decided to do it. But it made for quite a bitty first half, and Jamel played competitively and was aggressive. And Cheshire got into a little bit of rhythm when Evans was able to attack, and Ocherobia gave them something inside. But London, the impression in the first half was that London never got out of second gear. I thought the coach was a little bit tetchy, to be honest. He got a couple of calls he didn't like. We had a couple of, those raised eyebrow moments from Zubcic and Huban. And to be honest, you look back and they were both good calls. Zubcic had his elbow up on the spin move, and Huban on the screen pushed whoever at Jamel into the guy who was setting the screen. They're both, you look back, they're both good calls, but if you looked at the players' faces, you would think that they'd just been wrongly accused of a serious sexual offence, or anything, just it was like a bewilderment. What? Couldn't happen. And then the coach was doing the double teapot a bit, with the two hands on the side and all of that, and getting in and getting to the refs. So and obviously Soko's still not there. So so your 1 game punishment for team suspension is now gone into 3 games, and let's be honest, he's a captain. So that means there's a little bit of stuff going on there in the background. Decker isn't there, so he's obviously only having his mid-season break. I know he's injured, but he's not traveling with the team. He wasn't on the bench. It's always interesting to look at who's on the bench, dressed and not dressed, and who's there and who's not. So I get the feeling that they might have got to that point in it may be some of the fallout from Friday. It may be whereby kind of the plate spinning has got just a little bit more complicated than they really wanted or needed it to be, which is causing a little bit of added stress. To which my response is tough that you caused it. And I thought, even midway through the third quarter in this game, they were really out of sync.
So Cheshire had a 12-4 finish to the first half to cut the gap to 1 point. And then, as you say, in the third quarter, London's still not quite with it. And I was actually wondering whether this was an opportunity for Cheshire to get a win that actually doesn't really matter to London because they're so far clear of Leicester and Bristol, but would matter to Cheshire, given where they are in the standings and the teams that are behind them. And Cheshire, with 3 minutes to go in the third quarter, were up 6, 51-45. But then London scored the last 9 points of the third period and the first 18 points of the fourth quarter. Best had 11 in quick succession. So it went from 51-45 to 51-72. And Ben Thomas had called 2 timeouts in the fourth quarter before they managed to score.
Well, it was Best, Nelson, and by the way, both of those guys are balling at the moment. They're really playing high-level basketball, both of them. You can see it in Luke Nelson's confidence shooting it. You can see it with Aaron Best as well. But more than anybody was Josh Sharma. Josh Sharma, the guy who wasn't on the court to guard Patrick Tappy at the end of the Glasgow game because he wanted a 6'4", 29-year-old a chance to prove himself. He basically dominated the fourth quarter and part of the third quarter. At both ends, he blocked shots, he changed shots, he dunked the ball in every different way you could imagine. They locked down, and Cheshire, to be fair, the problem that they had was when Evans wasn't in the game, then Austin wasn't in the game either because he's hurt. You're putting the ball in the hands of Archibald, and then you've got a kind of mismatch of lineups with Ulf in there who hasn't played that much, and Archibald's a new guy, doesn't know his teammates, and then they miss a few shots as well. So they're searching for a line against London. It only takes 5 minutes, doesn't it? And the whole thing is gone. But I thought Sharma was absolutely outstanding. In this, and the guards, the different. Look, the reality is London have got this point without Taylor. They got 4 guards, right? They got Nelson, Best, Solowade, and Kaboza. Okay, and Solowade is a solid defensive-minded point guard who needs scorers around him, basically, and will knock down shots occasionally when he's feeling it. Kaboza is a young attack guard, but he is very, very raw. And at this point in time, if Marcus Evans sees him, and that he is an opportunity for other teams in the BBL, because to be honest, if he's playing, it means that Nelson and Best aren't playing. That doesn't mean he can't do it, but it means that that the other guys are looking at him thinking, okay, well, here we go, here's my go now. And then you have Nelson and Best, and they are entirely different when Nelson and Best are in the game, because they are high level players and they space the court and they know where their shots are coming from. There was a couple of things on the refs. It happened again. I'm not happy. the unsportsmanlike I'm complaining about on the little fast break touch fouls. Someone's going to step under somebody when they're shooting and take away their landing space. That's the most dangerous play in basketball. You've got to start calling that unsportsmanlike. There's too many times.
My pushback on that is I don't think it's in the rules for them to do that. It is EuroLeague, Eurocup changed the rules.
Right.
Last year or the year before, at the request of the coaches, by the way, to call that as an unsportsmanlike foul, but it's not in the
FIBA rules.
Not in the
well,
FIBA
I stand
rules.
by in that case, you're doing a good job there sticking up for them, because that needs to be changed. Because it just it's firstly it takes away the risk of injury, but secondly it also takes away doubt as to flops. Because if people aren't in people's landing spaces and they're still falling over, well, it's pretty clear it's not a foul. It's a flop. So it just needs to change. There's multiple times in this game, both teams, Cheshire primarily, but both teams, whereby the foul in the jump shot wasn't in the air on the contact. Foul was on the ground, taking away the space, and that, to me, that's a scourge that needs to be ironed out of this. That we need to get rid of it, because I don't want to see good players breaking their ankles. But outside of that, London, they were wobbly. They were wobbling, but to give them credit, the guys did what they were meant to do in the fourth quarter. And as I say, Sharma, Best, and Nelson in particular, showed a real appetite for playing. And all you can think of is what if.
Indeed. Cheshire's first score was 5.5 minutes into the fourth quarter. Fast break run out. They were outscored 32-14 in the fourth quarter as London made the final scoreline look very comfortable, which it hadn't looked likely to be with 13 minutes to go. Teague with 14 points, Ocherobia 10, Anderson 10 and 9, Nelson 21 and 9 assists, Sharma 17 points and 12 rebounds, and Best had 11. So London go to 18 and 2, and Cheshire dropped to 12 and 12, both still in first and fourth places respectively. But obviously nobody else played a league game, so there's no real point in going through all the standings since then. But all four teams in the trophy semi-final will feel and validly feel that they have a really good chance to win something.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And ultimately none of them have got there the easy way, which is nice. Sheffield win at Leicester. Glasgow beat Caledonia, beat London. Plymouth, Derby go down to Plymouth after playing at Westminster and win on the BBL team's floor. And probably only Cheshire who enjoyed the comfort of the away game at Surrey. But even then you've got to go away from home in the BBL and win any team. So. No, I mean, it's a hell of an argument for keeping it. I'll be honest, there's not a hell of an argument for keeping it. I just London got 16 league games left. I get that they've got 4 European games left, maybe 5, maybe 6, maybe 7, or maybe 8. But probably between 4 and 5, one would have thought. So they've got still got 21 games left, and it's now the 14th or the 10th of February, and they finish at the end of April. So they got 20 odd games in 60 odd days, 65, maybe no 75 days, which is tough. But that's the last 4 aren't going to matter if they do what they're meant to do. Or they might pick or choose 1 or 2 in between, which don't matter. They've got a set team full of kids playing in the NBL who can move up if they want to. And the league might say no, but I would say, well, given that they run the league, I don't know if that's going to happen. No, they don't run the league, but
No.
And so what? 2 more games, the trophy, and that's going to break the back of your season. Give me a break. Sorry, I'm back.
There we go. And before we go into another hour of Sunday Night Breakdown, I think we're going to call it a day for this week, and we will be back with you next Sunday. So have a great week, whatever you're doing, and we'll see you next week. Goodbye.
Bye, guys.